You've just arrowed a great buck. You're stoked beyond belief. The adrenaline is running through your veins, but you need to stay focused. What you do in the next few seconds can make all the difference in the world whether you retrieve that buck and how quickly you retrieve that buck.
The first thing you do is sit and wait. There's no hurry. You just made the shot. That meat is not going to spoil for hours and hours and hours. So catch your breath.
If you want to find every deer you shoot, focus on the details. I was born, raised, and I've lived in Wisconsin my whole life. And when it comes to September in Wisconsin, there's three things we can always count on: Badger football, Packer football, and bow hunting season. This past season for me was a little bit crazy. With all the work trips throughout the country, it didn't give me much time to hunt at home. So I circled 1 week at the end of September, really nice weather, and we hoped we could make it happen in a short amount of time.
Okay, I have to stop and do this. I always do this. Tracy, Taylor, and Emily. My good luck charms. Now that is an encounter that everybody in America hopes for. You know, we're spoiled. I get to do this a lot and I get to do it all over. But I've never forgotten my roots. That buck right there, there's 11 million whitetail hunters and I'm one of them who's very excited that we might have just punched our tag.
After reviewing the footage, we'd see the arrow. It hits right above the flank. And that's the kind of moment that gives me a, I don't know.
Land of Whitetail is brought to you by Cuddyback, CuddyLink, 16 cameras, 1 cell plan, $10 per month. Scent Killer Gold with Hunt Dry technology. Apply it, dry it, and go hunt. Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable. And by B&W Trailer Hitches Tow and Stow, the last trailer hitch you'll ever need. Absolute best food plot for attracting whitetails during fall hunting season is Buck Forage Oats. This is their highest priority, and it's done in the world's greatest, most winter-tolerant oats ever developed. Visit their website at buckforage.com, or better yet, give them a call at 800-299-6287.
In most cases, unless you actually saw the buck go down, it's a good idea to wait before you go after the deer. You don't want to jump him up and keep him moving, get his adrenaline going. You want him, if it isn't an immediately lethal shot, you need him to go lay down, calm down, and possibly expire. One of the biggest clues as to whether you should go, whether you should stay, those clues are going to be found on the arrow. The first thing you need to do is retrieve that arrow. It's going to provide those clues that might tell you the position of the shot. If you see that it's bubbly blood, or the indications of a good heart shot or a good lung shot, you're still going to wait for a little while, but you're probably going to proceed and go after that deer. If there's evidence of a gut shot, those are the times when you're just going to have to probably get out of the woods, give that buck or doe a time to settle down, expire, and then go back after it.
A gut shot is going to kill that deer. The biggest thing you have to remember, absolutely write this down and never forget, is to don't go after that deer until you've waited at minimum of 6 hours, and better yet 7 to 8, because that's how long it takes a gut or a paunch hit deer to die. Approximately 7 hours, you're going to be able to collect that trophy. It's going to be an agonizing 7 hours, but it's the best thing you can do to find that deer at the end of the trail.
Had that deer been standing broadside, that might have been a clean gut shot. Deer's going to die, I know what's going to happen, but my process is going to be different. This process, what we want to do is I'm going to sneak out of the blind, I'm going to tiptoe over there as quietly as possible and see if I can find that arrow. That's step one to blood trailing.
He was right here. He was standing right here when I shot. It's only a couple drops. There's the arrow right there. Doesn't smell, and I've got blood from tip to tip. There's a good spray of blood right here.
This is central Wisconsin. It's a very small property. It's 77 acres. That's not a lot of land, and we're hunting on the back end of that. Surrounded by many other properties ranging from 5 acres to 40 acres to, there's all sorts of little properties. So we had an idea where the deer went. We see where he jumped the fence line. So now we have to call our neighbor, tell him about the situation, and try to get permission to go blood trail on his land.
Okay, with you, what I'll do is I'll just, I'll go at first light, and I won't be in there for very long. All right, well, I very much appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, bye. This segment is brought to you by Outdoor Edge Knives and Tools, from field to freezer and everything in between.
In some cases, and this is unfortunate, but it happens a lot, that deer is going to run off onto a neighboring property. Okay, you've got two problems now. You've got a wounded deer, and you've got a wounded deer on a place where you don't have permission to go. If you've got a good relationship with your neighbors, I mean, that's golden. It's usually just a phone call and you can go in there and retrieve that deer. Even if you do have permission to go on the neighbor's, I personally would always give him a call and let him know that I'm going onto that property. Now, if it's a neighbor that you're not familiar with, you still need to get on the phone. You need to convince that person that you need to go in there and retrieve that deer. You know, most times they're gonna let you go in. There are gonna be those times though where you can't, and unfortunately deer are lost every year because you're not able to retrieve them on a land where you have no permission to hunt. You know, and that's probably a good indicator that maybe you should put a little forethought into stand placement before you hunt. You don't want to set up right next to a property where you know you're not going to be able to retrieve a deer. You might want to set up, even if it's not as good a place, on the opposite side of that property where you know you have more area to play with.
Blood right there, that's blood here, and then there's blood right there.
So back to the blood trail.
Okay,
This blood trail was very difficult for the fact that the way that arrow hit the deer, the entry wound was very far back. So we're not going to get a lot of bleeding out of that entry wound. The exit wound came through the armpit on the other side. So every time that deer took a step, it was covering up the exit wound. Okay, that's a nice thing about cool autumn days, is that it was cool enough last night that when we got in there, we got to back off on that deer. It's going to be a beautiful day today. It's going to be sunshine, blue skies. We're here at the crack of dawn. Going to let the sun get up here a little bit. We're going to go in there. We're going to start at the last spot, which wasn't very far from where I shot that deer, and we're going to pick it up there. Now with blood trailing, you try to stay on the blood trail. Sometimes that's not easy because if you have grass, which we have up here, it's really hard to find it, especially after the next day. So it requires a lot of patience and meticulous planning. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a grid search. This is very common. So basically what you do is you just do grids on that property and you space out. If you only have 2 guys, is what we have today. If you have 3 or 4, that's fine. But you methodically, 20 yards apart, very, very slowly, straight east-west lines in this case. Another 20 yards, east-west lines. We only have to cover 40 acres. So we're going to do that. If we don't find it on the first pass, we're going to stop, we're going to backtrack, and then we're going to crisscross. We're going to go opposite and all the way back the other way. Those grid searches a lot of times are almost foolproof, is in that you can find that deer where he's going to be laying. So let's get to it. Hang on, there's blood right there. Got him! Yes! Right there. We got him. We got him. Oh my God. We found our buck. This is more exciting, I think, than actually shooting a deer. It's 8:30. We got on this blood trail at 6:30 this morning. This buck did not go very far. And it would be really easy, I've seen it a lot, I try to hold my tongue when I'm on other camps, is to give up on a blood trail. As long as you have blood, you stay on the blood. We stayed on the blood. Let me tell you, this was really thick in here. I mean, it's Japanese barberry, it's raspberry brush, it's prickly ash. Look at, these are brand new pants. These are brand new Numa pants and they're ripped to shreds. I don't care, I'll get another pair. We've got our buck. And you know what you get for this? Woo! Yes! Meticulous notes, meticulous observations, and never give up when you're on a blood trail.
Land of Whitetail is brought to you by Sever Broadheads, straight through it. Get armed and deadly with Easton FMJ arrows. Outdoor Edge, make the cut. And by Sportsman's Guide. Nobody sells more tree stands, nobody sells them for less. Sportsmansguide.com.
Are you thinking of getting into deer hunting this year? I know a lot of people are. And there's a lot of areas where you have to use a shotgun. Here are 3 things you should consider if you're looking at a shotgun for deer hunting. Number 1, how much deer hunting are you going to do? Are you a bird hunter, a rabbit hunter, you do a lot of different things, and you might deer hunt for a week? Then I would suggest, you know, a gun like this. This is what I started with. This is Remington 870. The nice thing about the 870, it's solid. This is a 12 gauge. This has a bead on the front. The thing you need to consider is you have to run a lot of ammo through here to get used to that gun. No different than your pellet gun or your 22. Learn the gun and you'll be able to shoot deer with this no problem. Second thing you need to consider, what types of ammo should you use? There's a lot of shotgun ammo out there and some of it's pretty expensive. So what you want to do is read up on it. One thing I'm going to tell you, write this name down, Dave Henderson from Endicott, New York, the be-all, end-all shotgun expert in America. Find his book, Shotgunning for Deer. It's going to teach you more than I can teach you in this video. But you're going to learn all about slugs. A gun like this, remember, a Foster style slug. You don't need nothing fancy. One thing that a lot of people might want you to believe is that rifling in a shotgun barrel is going to help it spin. That's not true. That's a myth. Rifling in a shotgun barrel does not make that slug spin when it comes out of there. A Foster style slug, which shoots really good out of a gun like this, basically it's the design of that slug, the weight of that slug, and the retention of that slug, which making that slug accurate downrange. With some practice and the right ammo through a gun like this, you'd be well off shooting deer at 50 yards and less during deer season. Now the third thing you want to keep in mind is if you're going to do a lot of deer hunting and that's all you want to do, then I would recommend a dedicated gun just for deer hunting. Right here we have a Remington 870. Same gun as this. This is a 12, however, and this is a 20 gauge. This one looks different. It's got a nice black stock. It's kind of cool. It's tricked out. You can get a dedicated gun like this for just a little bit more, add some nice optics on it, and make sure that it's a dedicated shotgun scope. You put a rifle scope on there, you will ruin it immediately. Shotguns punish scopes a lot more than centerfire rifles. Okay, here's a final tip for you. When it comes to shooting a slug gun, it's different than a centerfire rifle. With a centerfire rifle, what you see is you see guys sometimes not even holding the forearm. What they do is they have their hand back here. However they're resting, they might have that on a rest right up there. And they're just coming up right here and slowly squeezing the trigger. You know, ideally see that little puff coming out of the barrel. When the gun goes off, it almost surprises you. Not what you want to do with a slug gun. Slug gun is a completely different shooting form. 3 points of contact and really solid contacts. Let's say I have to just shoot off of this bench. Point 1, point 2, point 3. And I'm going to get down. I'm going to get locked in, gripping the forend. I'm pulling the gun down and in toward me. Down and in, back this way. I'm going to get that as tight as possible. I'm going to get this as tight as possible, and I'm going to just bury that thing into my shoulder so it doesn't move. This hand still stays loose because I don't want to torque it. And when I shoot, boom, that thing's going to knock me back, but I'm going to keep steady by keeping that pressure point here. With a slug gun really rocks you. And that's one thing you want to keep in mind, is to be more accurate, is to be solid. Keep these tips in mind when you're hunting this fall, and I think you're going to have a lot more success.
Like a lot of bow hunters, I've sustained a shoulder injury that prevents me from pulling a lot of weight and shooting a lot of arrows at one practice session. That's why I take the one arrow approach. Now what I mean about a one arrow approach is that I'm not going to come out to the range and shoot 20 arrows. I might shoot 6, but I'm going to try to make every shot count. Shooting a bow well is as much a mental game as it is a physical game. Now it's important to shoot your bow a lot, to build up the muscles you need to draw your bow back and to develop some good muscle memory. But if you have an injury, or maybe you're an older archer, you're not going to come out and shoot 20 arrows at a time. So with the one arrow approach, you're going to make every shot count. And that means that I'm going to shoot one arrow at a time. I'm going to walk up to the target. I'm going to think about the shot I just made. I'm going to go back and I'm going to take my next shot. And just remember, you can practice this technique from a tree stand, from an elevated stand, from a ground blind, spot and stock simulation like we're doing here. All of those situations that you might encounter in the field, you can do here on the practice range. It's important to practice, but it's also important to practice smart. I need to shoot this one arrow approach because of a shoulder, but it's a good technique for all archers. It keeps your mind in the game. It gets you thinking about what you're doing rather than just mechanically shooting one arrow after another. Shoot often, shoot smart.